If there's a problem with interpretation, let me know. Also, I apologize to the interpreters if the notes are not exactly like what how I will be speaking. But I'll try to keep to the notes anyway. Thank you for working, and I would like to say that I'm very glad to be with you. My old colleagues, collaborators, but also among Greek and Turkish, Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot trade unionists. I thank the forum for the honor to invite me as a speaker, and I congratulate you for organizing this very important series. Of course, legal protection of employment is very important. I'm going to talk about employment protection in Cyprus, but in the Republic of Cyprus, having in mind also, by necessity, the European law, the European acquis, the law of the European Union, since our legislation is now that of the Republic of Cyprus, is certainly in line with the European legislation. So, traditional labor relations system since 1960, but even much before, was based on collective bargaining, and the legislative protection was only to complement, was only additional, and mostly, well, both for basic human rights and the right to organize, but also to support weaker groups of workers. The protection by legislation, of course, has become much more important because of the economic and labor market conditions of the last few years. Today, my role is to present a small part of the laws that aim at the protection of the workers. I'm going to talk about three main chapters of legislation: termination of employment, working time, and special forms of employment. So let's start with termination of employment. It's about redundancy dismissals, but also other dismissals. Rules for justified what is when dismissal is allowed and when it's not. Compensation, whether people get some money when they are dismissed and when. And the redundancy fund, which is a central fund for paying people who become redundant. I'll explain later. There's also a slightly different part of this termination of employment protection, which is under different law, about collective dismissals. So the first three parts are covered mainly by one law, but the fourth one by a new different law. So when is termination of employment allowed? When I'm mostly talking about termination at the initiative of the employer, termination by the employer. So there are two basic cases when termination is justified or unjustified. We don't say legal or illegal because it is normally not a criminal fault. It's not criminal to fire somebody, but the employer simply pays some money in the worst case. So redundancy is one of the cases that is justified. That is when the employer, when the enterprise finds that they have too many people, they cannot afford to have so many workers, so they have to reorganize, or somehow for other reasons, they have to dismiss, fire some people. The four main reasons for justified dismissals are: first one, redundancy; second is force majeure, for example, earthquake or war; the third one is end of agreed period of project completion. That is, when you build a large building, you need 10 workers more, let's say, and you make an agreement with them that they have been hired. The enterprise gave them a job just for this building. So when the building ends, of course, it is justified to let these workers go. And there's another reason, of course. If the performance of the worker is very bad, or if he behaves very badly, or he or she, then they can be dismissed, and the employer is right to do it. So maybe after some orders. So these are the four main reasons for justified dismissals. Here we have also notification, which is necessary in most cases before the termination of employment. That is, you have to give notice. The employer has to give notice to the worker, sometimes to the trade union also, before termination. There is one exception in the case of a very serious breach of conduct, very seriously bad behavior. For example, the worker attacks someone, does something very, very serious, then they can be dismissed immediately without any notice. All other cases of dismissal are unjustified. For example, if dismissal concerns basic human rights, like the right to organize, the right to collective bargaining, the right to get equal treatment between men and women, or some other protective legislation, like motherhood. If a pregnant woman is dismissed or not taken back after her leave, that's definitely unjustified. All these cases are covered by law. There is one case called forced resignation, which is interesting, or summary dismissal. That is, if the worker feels that he or she must resign, maybe resign immediately, they can do it, and they are protected by law. If the employer or the manager behaves very badly towards the worker is allowed resign and then ask for compensation. There's one thing, however, that the employee, the worker, must be careful in this case. They must be able to prove that there was a very bad behavior by the employer. So, when usually it's the employer's obligation to prove why there's a dismissal. In this particular case, the worker, the employee must have very good witnesses or send something in writing, maybe with a copy to the trade union or the Ministry of Labor, so that it is not no one, so that the employer will not say, but I didn't dismiss him, he or she just left. So, careful of the truth. There's another case with very little letters, but I would say it. The employee, the worker, also must be able to prove that there was a dismissal in cases of unjustified dismissal. If, for example, a manager tells you, you go home today, don't come tomorrow to work, you're fired. This may be unjustified, but when the worker goes to court, the worker, he or she, must be able to prove that this was done. So maybe the easiest thing is to ask for something written. Say, okay, I'm not coming tomorrow, but give it to me in writing. Otherwise, how can I prove that you said that? Termination of employment, when it is unjustified, must be paid either by compensation, the compensation that the employer pays, or paid by the Central Redundancy Fund. The Redundancy Fund is a central fund that works like social insurance and is operated by the Social Insurance Department, where employers contribute every month based on the money, on the wages of their employees. So they put a small percentage, it's about 1%, I think, every month, which goes to the Central Redundancy Fund. So if one is then dismissed as redundant, they can get money from this fund. In order to be covered, I don't have exactly the same version here. Okay, my paper, I'm not exactly the same as the slide, but it's okay. So, the redundancy coverage is not for everyone, but is only for people that have worked at least 2 years for the same employer. So, if your last employer, if you have worked only 1 year for the last employer, but previously you had 20 years in a similar job some other place, then the 20 years will not count, unfortunately, and you will not be covered at all. Because you don't have 2 years with the last employer. Also, the person that has 20 years of service, the person with many years of service will get more money out of the redundancy fund. So it's very different if you have 20 years rather than only 3 or 4 years. this was good in older times, but this is not written in your notes. But I'm not sure how good it is now when people change their jobs much more often. I think there are one or two exceptions in the law for this. So, in industries where change of job is very is usual, and has been usual for many years, like the construction industry, I think the workers carry their rights from one employer to the other. So I will have to check that. So there's another thing that is important for compensation. It's not only the number of years, but how high your wage is. If the worker has a high wage or salary, they will get a higher compensation. There's a ceiling for that. So if you're a very well-paid employee, you may not get exactly the same percentage as a medium-paid employee. And also there may be a lower ceiling, a lower limit. So maybe very low-paid employees are paid a little more than the normal percentage if you make the calculations. There's a question mark. I have to admit that I have to check that again, but this applies with many social insurance benefits. That is, they are normally proportional, but they have a low limit and a high limit, so that the system is a little more socially fair. It takes into account if you're a very highly paid person or if you're a very low paid person. The last point here, about employment. People can be, an employer may be asked by the court to re-employ, take back the worker if the dismissal was completely unjustified. But this applies under certain circumstances only, and only for enterprises with at least 20 or 21 workers. And anyway, in most cases, workers do not like to go back after they have been fired in this way, but occasionally it can be useful. Another thing about a different chapter about termination is collective dismissals. There's a special law for collective dismissals, which has to do mainly with procedures of consultation. That is, in addition to all the rights the workers have because of the termination of employment law, here they have another right. The employer has to consult, has to talk with the trade unions, all the workers' representatives, early enough before going to actually doing the dismissals. We are of course talking again mostly about redundancy dismissals. The law does not apply to small enterprises with up to 20 employees. It has to be 21 or more, because there are some problems in calculations of averages, but there are some details in the law that tell you how to find exactly how many people the enterprise has in their staff. In order to measure this, well, first of all, what we get is we have to define what are collective dismissals. So, collective means a large number of employees, large number of workers in a very short time, that is under 1 month, will be dismissed together. or gradually, but within the 30 days. There's a lower limit again. It has to be at least 10 persons. These 10 persons must be dismissed, otherwise it is not supposed to be collective. And also for very large firms, which are rare in Cyprus, but we have a few. Even if they dismiss 30 persons, but this is less than 10% of their workforce, if they have more than 300 workers, they still have to respect the collective dismissals law. This is one of the new laws that we have had recently. It's based on a European directive. So the consultation must be conducted quickly in time, not the last moment before dismissal. And for this reason, the employer has to wait for 30 days before actually brings the dismissal. That is, he has to give notice to the worker representatives and also a copy to the Ministry of Labour, and then they can start consultations within these 30 days and exchange information, etc. And at the end of the 30 days, they can proceed to the dismissals if there is no other solution. The employer has to provide some information on the reasons why he's doing the dismissal and when exactly he's going to do it, how he chose, how he's going to choose the people who are going to be dismissed, and if he's going to give them some extra payment, that is in addition to that provided by the Central Redundancy Fund, he has to explain all these things. The authorities, that is the Ministry of Labour, have to be also notified so that they can take some measures as they think that they should. If it's a very large case of redundancies, and this law is not made for Cyprus only, but sometimes in a small town, one factory may close down in France or Germany or somewhere, and it is not only those workers that are affected, but the whole community, because that factory was very basic for the economy of the area. So the ministry may wish to see what else they can do, maybe with the help of worker representatives and worker and employer organizations. Maybe they can see what else they can do so that there is no complete unemployment in that area. By the way, there are also some other consultative procedures which are not in these laws, but they have been respected in Cyprus. There is no note about this in the notes. But the Industrial Relations Code, which is not legally binding, I'm sure you have heard about it, provides also for consultation on several matters. One of them, of course, may well be this. Consultation means that the last decision, the final decision, there's no agreement, will be taken by the employer. So this is not a magical way to solve problems or achieve agreements between workers and employers. This is recognized, and that's why where the word consultations is preferred here rather than negotiations or bargaining. Okay, this covers the first, maybe the most important part of my presentation. I'll go a little faster. The second chapter is about working time. There is a working time framework law that says which is based again on the European directive, and that law says that people cannot work more than so many hours, they cannot have less than so much time for rest, annual leave, etc. And also it puts some limits on night work, shift work, and work rates, how fast or how monotonous work will be. This working time framework is complemented by other laws about hours of work. The framework law says that people cannot work for more than 48 hours a week, including overtime. So the normal time may be, for example, 40 or 42 hours, or 38 or whatever. But if there's overtime, in total, it cannot be more than 48. It also gives some flexibility, because it says that 48 hours may be an average. 48 hours may be an average. So it means that 1 week someone can work for 60 hours, but the next week for, I don't know, much less than 48, so that the average, the average has to be not only over 1 week, over 2 weeks, but also up to 4 months. You can make an average for 4 months, and this is supposed to be legal. There are some special extra laws that make a few more limitations on this. The second issue is about night rest or additional rest every weekend or every 2 weekends. There is a 4 weeks of annual leave which is obligatory, and it cannot be paid in cash unless someone is dismissed, only at the time of dismissal. If he has some paid, some leave that was given to him or her, they can be paid for that. But that's the only exception. Annual leave, it must be for rest. Night work and shift work. There are some special limitations for night and shift work. So you cannot work too much at night, or you have to get some extra rest. And shift work also has some limitations, but I'm not going to go into any detail. There are a few more working time laws that work together with the working time framework. Most of them are older, but some of them have been adapted, amended, so that they are all now in line with they're supposed to be in line with European law. There's a shop's hour law, which is one of the most difficult laws, difficult for ministers also. And now we have an ongoing discussion on how the shop assistants, the shop employees law should be and what time shops should open. The hours of employment law for offices and services. This covers, for example, clerks who work in tourist offices, but not shops that sell things. There's a land transport law, driver's law, which is a the more recent, well, we used to have one previously, but it has become much more complicated by the EU regulation. Again, there are special limitations how long you can drive, and of course this is also part of safety. And in addition to how long someone can drive a truck or a passenger car, a bus, for example, we have to be careful that driving time is not exactly the same as working time. That is, some people are drivers, but also do some extra work. So both of these things must be taken into account. I think I have to go faster. There's also another special law for the sea, people who work in the sea, seafarers, and some laws or regulations for hotels, catering, entertainment places, restaurants, etc. Well, some of these, many of these laws do not include the police and the armed forces for obvious reasons, and also some of them cover one part of industry, or one part of economic activity, while the others another. And there are also some exceptions or exclusions for practicing physicians. A doctor who has finished his degree but has to work. They should be prepared to work many hours, and they are not covered by this protection. Also some church occupations, transport occupations, and for managers and family members. That is, if you have a small business and it's family members that work there, they're not necessarily covered by the protection of the working time laws, and also managers may be excluded. Also, most of these laws accept collective agreements, and they provide that such agreements take precedence. So if there is a collective agreement together with law, the agreement should be respected. Usually, this means that the agreement should be more favorable to the employee, but there are a couple of times that the agreement may give a little less protection to the employee, but is still acceptable. This is more clearly said on this slide. For example, people who have their own collective agreement, a big factory with their own collective agreement, may decide in common, jointly, the two sides, to have a little less rest, for example, in certain cases. But of course, they must get some other way to rest, maybe later or some other time. So here's some more work with the trade unions. Here. Now I go to the last part of my presentation, the third one, the three. I'll try to cover it very quickly. There are some special forms of employment that were not so normal, usual in the past, but now they are more usual. One is part-time employment, and the other is fixed-term employment. The part-time employment law basically says that there should be equal rights, equal treatment between full-time workers and part-time workers, or proportionally equal treatment. They have some basic rights, just as full-time workers. They're also, for example, entitled to a full annual leave. But of course, they get paid less. They get paid as much as they were paying. Since they work fewer hours, they will get less money. So, the law says that if there are any problems with collective agreements about part-time work, they must be fixed. That a full-time worker cannot suddenly become a part-time worker. It cannot be made by force to become. It has to be voluntary. Full-time workers, in some cases, accept a reduction of their work, but this is supposed to be temporary until the crisis, the economic crisis, is over. And these are not, or should not be considered as part-time workers. And here there are some exceptions also, like the social insurance scheme may be slightly different because national social insurance schemes have certain problems with funding, for example, and they have been given this exception. Very casual work also is not supposed to be covered as part-time work. If you work only 3 hours a week, not 3 hours a day, for example, then this is casual work and is not covered. The last kind of, the second kind of non-typical work I want to mention is the fixed time work law. By the way, I think in your notes you may have there this line, instead of fixed time, I wrote full time by mistake. It's fixed time. So if you compare with open-ended relations, what is fixed time? Is when you work for, let's say, 6 months, because there's a project for 6 months, or because for some reason you were hired for only 6 months. These people must have, fixed time workers, must have equal treatment of comparable treatment with open-ended people who have the normal, or until recently, the very normal contract or relationship where it was forever until you became 60 or 65. Or unless you were dismissed for some special reason. There are some exceptions here, like with apprentices, not covered by this law. And there's something important here, which was already present under the termination of employment law, but it's more. It's even clearer in this law, the fixed time work law, that if you have a series of short-term contracts, one after another, then you become, as a worker, you become an open-ended, a worker with open-ended relationship. There are only special exceptions, for example, casual workers or an ending project. If, for example, you're hired to work on one building, it's finished, then they give you another building where it's also finished, then a third one is also finished, then possibly this, even though there is a series of contracts that are one after the other, it is possible that you don't become a worker with an open-ended contract in this case. Of course, both part-time work and fixed work have become more usual during the last decades in many countries, even European countries. But maybe they are a little less important still in Cyprus. Over here. I have to stop, but I'd be happy to hear your comments, maybe answer questions later, some questions. Thank you very much just in case, like, contact me.